Boy, oh boy, the trade market is starting to heat up with the trade just about to go down and very big names like Jason Robertson on the move. This is exactly where the summer of Chevy could really make moves.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, there is quite a bit of trade market action starting up. Apparently, today was the day that everyone decided things would really start kicking off. We've seen more concrete rumors around Jason Robertson. We are just about to see the return from an alleged Chris Kreider trade to the Ducks. Seems like everything's kicking off. We're seeing offer sheet articles coming out now. It's officially hype time, folks. This is where the Winnipeg Jets could really do some damage, and hopefully of the positive kind. I'm going to talk a little bit later about some of the offer sheet things to look at and maybe to avoid, and how the Jets might interplay in all of these different moments. But before we get to that, just wanted to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, like I said, probably the biggest piece of news today is that Jason Robertson is apparently being shopped, which, if you're the Dallas Stars, that's a fairly sizable core move. Now, Robertson has been a very, very good elite winger for several years now. He is one of the best finishers in that star system. He's a great two-way presence, and every time you watch him, you know that he's probably going to do something pretty good. That is until this season. This year for him was definitely a bit of a step back, and there seemed to be some sort of lingering injury that definitely impacted the first half of the season. And the second half, things started to look a little more normal, but even once he came back during the playoffs, you could just kind of tell that he wasn't really 100%. And so a lot of the great stuff that you usually see from him was fairly absent. He had a couple of moments where he had some bright spots in the postseason, but by and large, the Jason Robertson that you know and love really wasn't very visible. Now, I know he is a Stars player. I personally am a big fan of his. I've always been a Jason Robertson admirer. Very much wish that he was a Jet, and maybe there's a chance that he could be. It sounds like Dallas feels his next contract might be too expensive. And given that they have a weird situation with their core where you have a lot of contracts expiring in the near future, and you could kick this can down the road. It just seems like Dallas is trying to get ahead of all this and make a decision before Robertson maybe decides to leave of his own accord. If he does that and forces a move, then the return could be rough. So I don't know what Dallas's full angle here is, other than maybe trying to fish out a top four defender. I could see them trying to upgrade that right side because all of their good defenders, kind of like Winnipeg, are all on the left side, but the Jets' right side is still better than what Dallas has. The Stars just really need something. I've thought about some potential fits. Maybe there's a Buffalo situation that you could try and figure out. Maybe Dobson, but you also have to find a team that actually wants Robertson and is willing to give him, 10 plus mil, most likely. He's going to be a huge contract extension in the near future. He'll command a big salary. And so the return has to make sense for a lot of teams. And for Robertson himself, he probably doesn't want to go to another team that's like rebuilding. So, this is a weird situation. You don't really see a lot of players of Robertson's caliber get moved. They've increasingly happened over the years, but again, just not that many players his age where he's in a really good spot. He's still an RFA, and he is still considered a big part of their core, at least for the time being actively shopped. It just doesn't really happen that often. So that's one to keep an eye out for. If the Jets were to make a play here, it would make a lot of sense if you're trying to figure out a bigger long-term play for Ehlers potentially leaving, right? If you swap Ehlers for Robertson in this deal, maybe Ehlers goes somewhere else, but you make a trade with the Stars for Robertson's rights. I could see this playing out pretty darn well. Not only do you have a good young Filipino star who would actually fit perfectly for some of the Jets community nights, but he's also a fantastic player. I'm a huge fan of his scoring talent and prowess. I think that he'd be an absolute monster. And I also feel like it'd be hard to get him to the Jets. He's going to need a big raise. He's going to need a big roster spot. And I do wonder if the Jets would even want to entertain all that entails. But for me, at least, if you need a huge addition to your team out wide, it's just a very easy yes, right? The only question is, what would the price be? And if the Stars don't want to trade in division, that makes things a little more complicated. So, yeah, for a lot of reasons, I could see Robertson very much going outside of the Central. In fact, I would probably expect him to. The Jets also don't really trade for guys like this. Especially if they don't have a disgruntled star of their own going the other way. And in this case, there's no one really disgruntled. It just feels like the Stars are trying to consolidate their pieces, figure out where they have an excess of depth, and try and turn that into something functional for their back end. So, it's an interesting gamble. I don't know how I feel about it necessarily. But, the good teams tend to be aggressive. Maybe Dallas thinks that they're going to get a really good return here, which is likely. The only question I have for Jim Nill is, does he actually know what a good defenseman looks like? Considering he signed guys like Lyubushkin and Dumba for fairly hefty contracts, and, maybe Lyubushkin is the only guy who's been okay there. I wouldn't really feel super comfortable if I'm, a Stars fan looking at all this and trying to suss out what exactly is coming back the other way. So keep an eye on that situation. The Robertson deal could also impact the Ehlers market. If the team that was trying to get Ehlers gets Robertson instead, that could close off a big door for Nick. But I will say that for Ehlers, there will still be plenty of other suitors. Teams may not want to give up big assets anyways, and just use cap space instead to try and bring Nick home. That said, if the Jets, try to architect some sort of sign and trade, I guess that's also an option. Those don't really happen that often, and I feel like, there's not really a lot of incentive for teams to go this route, much less, maybe a guy who doesn't have the craziest counting stats right now and might not be as in demand as a Robertson. So, there's a lot balancing all of this for the Jets to consider. But if they could parlay a sign and trade, certainly, if Nick is going to leave for sure, that's the way to go. But again, the Robertson deal might really have an outsized impact here on what the market for a sign and trade Ehlers even looks like. So keep a close eye heading into the draft. It's really not entirely clear and not even sure that this is going to happen, but there's a lot of smoke apparently. There's something to that smoke from what, folks like Saravalli have suggested, and it could be coming in the near future. So given how much the rumors continue to percolate, it's exciting times if you're trying to figure out, the start of this big offseason. Teams are already positioning for stuff. We're seeing Chris Kreider going to the Ducks for some sort of a prospect and a pick. The exact return is still TBD as of this recording. But, man, it feels like this is a prime opportunity for the Jets to really start weighing their options. There's a lot moving around, lots of behind-the-scenes work, some real big moving parts. The draft is in a few weeks. If ever there was a prime opportunity for the Jets to do something real cool, we might be getting into it big time. But of course, one of those big levers I talked about a couple weeks ago is the offer sheet. And now we're starting to get some rumored offer sheet targets, some players folks could go for, as well as what an offer sheet for those players might look like. And given some of the projections, I can tell you there are a few that I think the Jets should really stay away from, and some guys that Winnipeg really should be hot to trot for. We'll chat all about that in just a brief moment. You just realized your business needed to hire somebody yesterday. Just like we're coming up to the draft and trying to bring in some big new Jets prospects, maybe you're an employer looking to bring an amazing candidate in who fills your qualifications. Well, it's never been easier to do so with Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. I've used Indeed when I was looking for work many moons ago. Can personally attest to the fact that the resume builder is convenient, it's fast, and it matched me to jobs that matched my work experience, my domain expertise, and even my salary requirements. So for an employer, this has to be such an easy process. Couldn't recommend it enough. And now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about us on, or you heard about Indeed on the Locked On Winnipeg Jets podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed, is all you need. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's show as we are chatting a little bit about the offer sheet rumors that are now starting to circulate. It's getting to be a real good time, folks. This is the meat of the offseason coming right up, and a lot of teams are already positioning themselves to maybe think about offer sheets, maybe make some trade considerations. There's a lot floating around. So I know the Jets maybe are still kind of a distant thought right now after just getting knocked out of the playoffs within the past couple weeks. It's already time to think about the offseason, folks, and I'm actually pretty excited about it. This feels like a really good chance for the Jets to do something big and finally address some of this team's bigger challenges and issues. I'm already looking forward to next season. I'm already thinking about all the stuff that could happen. And I know that a lot of you are kind of pessimistic in a lot of ways about the Jets, and what they might do. And I can't say that I entirely disagree with it. I fully understand why we all have expressed skepticism. Sometimes that skepticism is validated. So, I don't want to sit here and say that I'm feeling 100% amazing about it, but I'm getting real excited about this prospect of all these players coming up for offer sheet consideration and the fact that teams need to jettison some big talent. Looking at the list, though, there are some guys that, teams are going to be in on. Matthew Nyes, obviously, is going to be one of the biggest ones. He is projected from AFP Analytics to get a big contract at around 7x7. Sounds like that contract with the Leafs might actually be happening, so he may not even be an offer sheet target in the near future, but the offer sheet suggestion from Daily Faceoff was like 11.7 by 5. And that's 11.7 million for 5 years. That to me is just nope. The Jets don't qualify for this. I'm actually extremely thankful that they don't. Nyes, I think is a very good winger. Don't get me wrong, but you look at the sort of money that he could be bringing in on an offer sheet, and sure, 11.7 is probably really high and maybe something crazy that teams don't push for, especially if you look at maybe how they're doing it, right? Are you looking at maybe some of the bonus structure embedded in there, all that stuff? But man, 5 years for that kind of money, even at like 9 or 10 mil, it's pretty crazy stuff. So I lean towards that being a big avoid. If the Jets were to get their 2026 second rounder back, just as it's not a compensation package you need to mess with, especially when you're talking about 2 firsts going that way on top of all the other stuff and the cap space that you need to bring him in. Just not really a situation that I think Winnipeg would ever be involved in. A guy that the Jets might be looking at, though, is Will Cooley. And Cooley is kind of in a curious spot. He also is sort of in the range where his projected offer sheet, or at least the suggested one of like 5 years by 7 mil, it also sits outside of the Jets' purview just because, again, we don't have the second round pick. His upcoming projected extension is like 3.4 mil for about 3 years. Now, Cooley could be a very intriguing fit as a Jets trade option. Winnipeg would be looking for a gritty two-way goal scorer who can kind of fit alongside maybe a Lowry. Obviously, the Jets are frankly looking for offensive help up and down the team, and Cooley has a sort of energetic motor. He's very physical, and he's not afraid to go into the corners and win battles along the forecheck. could be a very Arneal kind of player. If he goes to Winnipeg in some sort of a swap with the Rangers looking to really shake things up, you could see a very clear fit there. I don't know what this would really cost in terms of a trade package. The compensation for his offer sheet, based on the projected offer sheet range, is kind of in that first and second round category. So I don't think the Jets would need to give up something that expensive. I could be mistaken. Maybe you'd need to do like a first and a prospect. I feel like if you're going that route, I'd prefer, using that package on something a little bigger. Cooley's great and he's young. I just don't really like that sort of trade for a wing player, right? I'd be looking more for a center and somebody who can really help that position, because the Jets right now, they just don't have a lot of really highly skilled depth. I feel like they can replace the winger stuff a little more easily. Well, within reason. But Cooley, again, could be an intriguing one if the Rangers are worried about offer sheets and the Jets can maybe kind of put something in their ear. JJ Peterka also on this list. Peterka is projected to get something like $7 by $8 million over the next several years, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be the Sabres if the rumors are to be believed. Again, a lot of speculation about his future with the Sabres. That one would be intriguing because I don't think the Jets can actually make a deal there. Peterka, he's a very here and now kind of player, but the Sabres are also kind of a here and now team. So if you're making a deal with them, something of a roster player, like a really good one, has to be going back the other way. I guess if you were to talk about Perfetti, I could see that being a thing as part of a trade package, but, I don't know how I feel about that personally. Now, yes, Peterka would be an upgrade for the Jets in a lot of ways, but just, personally, again, I got a soft spot for Cole, and after 1.6, can you really trade him? The answer is yes. There's always a price, and I get the business aspect, but in terms of, the sort of offer sheet compensation, the Daily Faceoff was talking about doing like a 9.4-ish by 2 years with a very, front-loaded structure that pays him immediate salary, because the Sabres don't usually do a lot of this in terms of, a big signing bonus up front. And so if you do that, maybe they don't want to match. But again, that's a big salary compensation range. You are talking a first, second, and third, which already puts the Jets out unless they get their second back. So for the Jets, I feel like their only option here would be a trade. And that's probably the better way to go about it anyways. I think if you can sort of sort that out a little bit more in advance rather than trying to do the offer sheet, it would probably make the most sense. Now, the last guy on this list is actually a real, a really intriguing offer sheet option for Winnipeg. Very specifically, the Jets have a real good chance to try and get this guy in. It's Mavrik Bourque from the Stars. And Bourque right now kind of sits at like a middle six center with some decent upside. He's young. He's really projected not to make more than like $2 million over the next couple seasons. And that puts him in a much lower offer sheet, which could put the Stars in a really tight spot, right? Dallas does not have a lot of space to work with. They are cap squeezed. And if you put them in a vice grip with an offer sheet that's just a bit over and still at a low, cap hit, but enough to really put them in a tight spot where they don't have any room to maneuver, they might have to let it go. And it would be as low as like a 2026 third rounder. So, it makes a lot of sense to make Bourque your target. You look at how the Blues really hit the Oilers hard with Holloway and Broberg. This is a very similar kind of thing. And Bourque would be the kind of guy where you'd think maybe long-term he becomes your middle six 2C answer. Again, you're projecting a little bit with his skill set, but he is very intriguing. I think given the minutes that he's played, he's put up some very healthy numbers, especially given his role. And you make Dallas have a tougher time. You weaken them a little bit on their roster because Bourque is probably somebody that they would really like to keep, especially after just losing Stankoven. So, yeah, this could be a really fun one for the Jets. It also feels like the sort of target where Winnipeg could directly hurt a rival. And, yeah, obviously it's not going to be a great relationship builder, but you know what? It's the Stars. They're a division rival. And if you target them and force them to not match, the Jets could really make some hay here and put them in a tight spot. So, this business really shouldn't be about friendships all the time. Yeah, maybe make a mess sometimes. And for the Jets, Bourque makes a lot of sense. He's a good player. He'd fit for Winnipeg's upgrade situation, and he would actually be, among all the players on this list for me, the most realistic and most intriguing of the offer sheet options. But curious to know how you feel about that. Are there guys here that you would want the Jets to trade for? With Winnipeg having already traded away its second rounder, it does make the number of offer sheet options fairly limited, which in some ways actually does make me feel slightly better about it in a couple of funky ways. More so the Jets keeping, themselves in check. It maybe prevents them from making a really bad offer sheet decision. The Jets probably wouldn't do it anyways, but you never know. This is a really big offseason for Winnipeg. There's a lot of pressure to perform, and it could be that the Jets do something crazy. So not making a bad offer sheet probably isn't the worst outcome. But curious, again, to know your thoughts on this. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, or on my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Earlier, I did mention the whole Ehlers thing in brief, especially the idea of a sign and trade of some sort. And apparently James Myrtle of The Athletic made a connection that I've talked about recently. The Utah Mammoth might be real interested in looking at a player like Ehlers. He's a perfect fit systematically. He's a big swing kind of guy, and he would be a big free agent ad if that's the route that they go with. Could this play into Winnipeg's advantage? Could they try and get a center out of this? We'll chat all about that in just a brief moment. There's nothing like playoff hockey. The energy, the rivalries, the nonstop action. With the Stanley Cup playoffs heating up, there's never been a better time to see it live. And Gametime makes getting into the building fast and affordable. Gametime gives you last-minute ticket deals, zone deals for cheap, deep discounts, panoramic seat views, and all-in pricing with no hidden fees. And ticket prices often drop the closer you get to puck drop, so you can score big without overpaying. I've used Gametime personally when I was buying Ravens tickets in the playoffs a couple years ago. They offered me a great seat view. I knew exactly what I was paying for up front. And if you're like me, you want to save money, and they have last minute deals that help you save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. No matter what it is you're into, they've got your back. And it's a great life hack for getting super cheap tickets and incredible deals on the fly. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's show as we are just chatting a little bit about some intriguing stuff, some new links that we're seeing from sports media folks speculating about Ehlers' future. And one of those teams that I've talked about making a ton of sense for Nick is Utah. I feel like it's taken a long time for the Mammoth to start talking or start being talked about as a real destination for Ehlers. I don't know why it hasn't been a higher priority. I know that they're not really seen as the most immediate winner when you think about Toronto, Carolina, all these other teams, even Winnipeg, right? All these teams would give him a technically better chance to win. Where I have a very different outlook is I look at what Utah did against teams like Winnipeg, despite having some real injury concerns this year, a lot of health challenges to their bigger players. They still absolutely spanked Winnipeg. They played a very up-tempo style. They were very fast, and they looked a lot like the prime Golden Knights and Avs. To me, I think Utah's in line to be a very dangerous team in the very near future. Ehlers really wouldn't have to, project that long to start seeing some real potential playoff opportunities here with the Mammoth. I think Utah is ambitious. I think that they're very smart. And it seems like they are willing to take bigger swings on some players than maybe, you'd normally imagine them to. They had a strong foundation to work with. You've got Cooley and company. Gunther obviously is going to be a real menace. So there's a lot of intrigue there. They've got a young squad supplemented with some interesting veteran depth. And Ehlers could become a really smart and really fun addition to that team, especially with how Turney has them playing. They're very fast, a lot of vertical counters, a lot of stuff off the rush. It just makes too much sense to me. And if this is the route that you go with, do you try and force a sign and trade? Obviously, the Mammoth do have some longer term cap considerations. They're not really in trouble necessarily, but they're not in the most comfortable of positions. And they've got some, RFAs and stuff to deal with. Maybe if you can get Barrett Hayton out of Utah, this could be a very beneficial swap for both teams. The Jets need a middle six center with real upside to potentially become a 2C, and Utah needs to take a big swing on a high-octane skilled player. This kind of makes a lot of sense for both parties. Again, I don't quite know how the exact structure would work in terms of whether or not you'd go for a sign and trade and try to fish some package out of Utah, maybe give them like those earlier signing rights. I think that's a real question, especially coming into the draft in a few weeks and ahead of July 1st. But there does feel like there's something there to it. I've always liked Utah as a trade partner to begin with. I just feel like they've got some really good players that the Jets could use, and frankly, they kind of need to reorient how their roster is structured. I think that they could really benefit from adding a Nick type to boost their scoring prowess and somebody who can kind of fit their offensive style, while also maybe consolidating some of their center depth, which they've got some decent players there and guys who could immediately help the Jets. So, Hayton, I could even have some time for Schmaltz, although probably not for Ehlers specifically. I just think that there's real intrigue in that sort of marriage. If that package or swap doesn't happen, right, Ehlers could still move on to a different team, maybe the Canes. We've heard some real interesting rumors about who was supposed to get who in some of these deals over the past couple of weeks. We heard that maybe there was even a Marner to Vegas swap. So lots of moving parts. Marner could end up in Carolina. He could end up in Vegas somehow still. You could see a Robertson to Carolina deal. It's a really wide open space, and maybe that does benefit the Jets a bit in terms of trying to retain Ehlers. If he can't find a landing spot, this could be the place that he just settles down. But again, I think it's going to come down to what his agent advises too. And his agent might already be looking for greener pastures. So it's an interesting time for Jets fans. It's an interesting time for Ehlers. We're going to have some really big tests of faith coming over the next couple weeks. But amidst all of this, I do at least have optimism that this is the chance for the Jets to overhaul how they operate, to change how this roster is built, and really do something cool for the upcoming future. I think they've got an intriguing core of prospects coming in over the next few years. None of them are earth-shattering and game-changing in the way that you'd expect top prospects to be, but I think there's a lot of depth to draw from. And that could be what really helps elevate this squad to maybe what we've seen from Dallas the last few years. Hopefully it leads to more, results outside of the Western Conference Finals. But, being a perennial team that gets deeper in the postseason probably isn't the worst thing for the Jets, right? So lots of things to aspire to, lots of stuff moving around. I'm excited about this offseason. Hopefully we'll see if it kicks off here over the next couple of days for the Jets. Let's start off with the Dylan Sandberg extension, Chevy. That's going to be the first start of Summer of Chevy. But love to hear all your thoughts on this. What are you excited about for this coming summer? Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's show, though, that is all the time that we have. Thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets go.